The Chargers were big winners on day one of free agency, but they were quiet on day two with some big holes left at right tackle, right guard, and linebacker. And we have some players still on the market the Chargers could target at those positions on today's Locked On Chargers podcast.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier. Thank you guys for checking out today's show. We've been covering the Chargers for over 6 seasons. This is our 5th season as a host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. And in any of our 6 seasons, we never put up the numbers that we did on yesterday's podcast on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all platforms. We're available on all platforms. Thank you guys for that with that big news and free agency. You guys made us our most downloaded show of all time. We appreciate you guys. Thank you for making us your first listen. And to make sure you never miss a show, subscribe on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcast from. But free agency is really just beginning. And I know a lot of Charger fans probably got greedy after day one and were wondering why the Chargers were so quiet on day two. But they made their big swings, right? And now it's about finding value players to fill in the cracks because we know the Chargers still have some big needs. So we're going to talk about all the big needs and then focus in specifically on the giant needs at right tackle and some free agent options that are still out there and would be upgrades over Storm Norton. Then we'll get into right guard and linebacker because we still don't know what's going to happen with Kazir White yet. Bobby Wagner, anybody? And then at the end of the show, we'll talk about Bryan Bulaga, the release there, what that does for the Chargers and the salary cap situation they have and how much space they have left to spend, and also get into the Chargers re-signing Chase Daniel to back up Justin Herbert once again. But David, we know the Chargers have big needs, right? I mean, we still know even with the moves, and we loved the moves. Don't get us wrong. This is not a panic podcast. Why are the Chargers not signing these other positions? They signed two of their biggest, really their 3 biggest impact kind of players that they were going to get: edge, defensive tackle, cornerback, all on the defensive side. The Chargers addressed all of those. That's a great start. But then you still leave, right tackle, right guard, tight end you could throw in there, RB2 with the uncertainty around Justin Jackson and maybe wanting to bring in a new kind of player behind Austin Eckler. And also with the need you have at linebacker because Kazir White was easily the best linebacker and he might still be the best option for them. But David, the point is, even with the big moves, the Chargers still have some holes left, and you want to fill as many of those as you can before the draft.
Yeah, you definitely do. I think you feel really good about the moves that the Chargers made already. I mean, they saw the big pain points that happened on the defense. A guy who can turn the football over, a guy who can command the number one wide receiver on any team and shut him down, a guy who's going to get after the quarterback and impact against the run with a Khalil Mack, just one of those complete players out there. And then, of course, you address the biggest need on the team, which was the run defense. You get 2 guys that are coming in immediately to answer that emphatically. But the work is not done. There's still other holes, and there are still plenty of guys out there to fix those holes. The Chargers are a much better football team today than they were a couple of days ago, but that doesn't mean they are a complete team by any means.
No, not at all. And I mean, at this point, you're looking at, okay, how can we fill these positions in free agency? And then how can we fill these positions in the draft? Because the Chargers don't have a second round pick, which I'm 100% fine with. But how many starters can you realistically think that you're going to get out of the draft, even though you have 10 picks, right? Most of those are coming after the 3rd round and beyond, right? 3 compensatory picks in the 7th round, 1 compensatory pick that came out today in the 6th round. A lot of late picks, but you're not expecting to get starters, at least immediately, out of those positions. So there's still some things that have to be addressed. And I think the biggest one is obviously right tackle, because we saw how much Storm Norton struggled last year playing that position. I think that was something that really hurt the Chargers offense, even though they were one of the best offenses in the league. And I mean, they just tendered Storm Norton, so he is coming back. That doesn't mean a lot. His salary is under $1 million. I think he still could be a cut candidate if the Chargers do bring in the right player. But last year, he gave up the 2nd most pressures in the NFL behind Liam Eichenberg, who was a rookie last year for the Dolphins on probably the worst offensive line in the league. He was sandwiched by 2 Dolphins tackles. Him and Jesse James were the guys surrounding Storm Norton as far as the pressures allowed. And true pass sets, according to PFF, he gave up the most pressures in the league last year. Trey Pipkins did do pretty good, David, but obviously the Chargers should be looking elsewhere to bring in, at least at the very least, solid veteran competition at that position. And there are a couple guys out there that could make sense.
Yeah, the Chargers cannot sit idly by and be content with Storm Norton or Trey Pipkins. I think you love what you saw out of Trey Pipkins in the limited
You really
snaps that
did.
you saw out of him. I mean,
Yeah.
he was the best version of himself that we have ever seen by far. But what's to say he's going to be able to replicate that on a down in and down out basis? He hasn't shown that to us. So until we see that, you have to look at other options to feel confident or feel good that you're going to be able to protect Justin Herbert's right side, which was very much a vulnerability for the Chargers last year. That's why Max Crosby went crazy on the right side against Storm Norton and abused him and abused Justin Herbert as a byproduct of that. But if you're looking at free agency and looking at some options that could potentially help you at right tackle, one of them for me is kind of an under the radar type of guy, who didn't really play right tackle last year. But if you look at his best years that he's played in the NFL, they came at right tackle. And I'm talking about Darrell Williams, who played guard last year. But like I said, you look at his best seasons in the NFL, they are at right tackle. When he has over 1,000 snaps, he did that in 2020 and he did that in 2017. He has only allowed 4 sacks, and he is his most complete self at right tackle. If you look at his PFF grades as a run blocker and a pass blocker, they are at their best when he's playing right tackle. This is a guy who can come in right away, who has experience, who, when playing at that position, plays extremely well.
I feel like we've talked about Darrell Williams as like an upgrade over Chargers offensive lineman, like in many off seasons. It seems like that dude is always out there, and he just got released by the Bills, so he's out there once again. One of the guys I was looking at, I mean, honestly, maybe one of the best players out there is Trent Brown, which sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, just a massive behemoth of a man who's played his best football with the Patriots, which is always a little sketchy. But then again, so did J.C. Jackson. I mean, only played with the Patriots. So, I mean, the only thing about him, missed too many games. That's why I
Yeah.
wouldn't be interested in him. The other guy that just got released by the Packers, Billy Turner, is a guy who I would be interested in. I mean, 30 years old, so a little older, but you're looking for, instant help there. You need a veteran there. You're not looking necessarily the right tackle of the future. You just need a guy who's going to get you by a year or two till you can groom the next guy there, right? Missed only 2 games in the 3 seasons prior to last year when he ended up missing 4 games. So he had 3 seasons before that of playing 14 games or more, which I like a lot. Obviously, you wish he didn't get hurt last year, but super solid tackle. 32 pressures allowed, 25th amongst tackles. And you have to think that's all tackles, right? Not just right tackles, left tackles. So that's above average as far as that goes. 3 sacks allowed, which was actually tied for 13th amongst tackles. And he did miss some games, so that plays into it. But obvious upgrade over Storm Norton, who put up, 60 pressures allowed last season. Half of that guy is a better player than Storm Norton is. And he is a guy that has, is a proven commodity somewhat at this point. The other guy I would like at would be Cornelius Lucas, who's kind of like a Ty Nsekhe situation where he's been a backup for the Washington Commanders. But the last 3 years, he's ended up getting more than 500 snaps each season. So he has, has some experience. He's still playing even though he is a backup. And in all those seasons, he's been really, really solid. So he has some extended playing time. And the biggest thing is he probably only cost, according to PFF, $2.5 million per season. Anyone else you want to touch on before we get to the right guards and the other big hogs, David?
Yes, there's one other guy on my list, and that is Riley Reef. Played right tackle for the Bengals last year, and I know you don't want to really grab too many offensive linemen from that group who got him murdered again.
Joe Burrow, yeah.
Yeah, Joe Burrow, excuse me. He got Joe Burrow murdered again. But this is a guy he's allowed 5 sacks or less in the last 5 seasons he's been in the NFL, and he has position flexibility. He has played left tackle extensively and both left tackle and right tackle extensively in the NFL. So he has a lot of experience. He is a little older. He's 33 years old. But again, this is a stopgap type of player. You bring him in, you sign him to a 1-year deal, you let him protect Justin Herbert on the right side, and you feel pretty comfortable about what you're going to get from Riley Reef.
And you still feel like it's an upgrade over Storm Norton. But it's not just right tackle, right? It's right guards and also linebackers. So we haven't talked about some right guards who are still out there. Maybe a familiar face comes back and fills that position for you. And we have to talk about the linebackers as well. But if they're trying to bring in an offensive lineman, I have a great idea for them. Offer them a lifetime supply of Built Bars, because that is just the best thing I think that you could do. And Built Bar is the best protein bar out there. But Offensive linemen, I think, are very smart. They're smarter than they look, but some of them probably aren't. Maybe here's some candy bars. You have a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, have some weight issues. You're feeding them candy bars. They're eating Built Bars the whole time. They're having something with less than 4 grams of net carbs, less than 4 grams of net sugars in most bars, and 17 grams of protein. You just keep feeding them to them, and they're not going to believe they're not candy bars because you have flavors like Rocky Road, flavors like the Shamrock Built Bar covered in white chocolate, or you could go mint brownie, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, some of my other all-time favorites as well. It's a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I don't know anyone who couldn't get behind that. You want to have something that tastes like a cheat meal while having something that still fits on your diet. Built Bar is the way to go. My favorite protein bar out there. Hands down, you can even save some money. Since you listen to this podcast, you can save 15% off with the promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, David. Well, we're not done here, and neither are the Chargers. They need some work still. But if you guys want to make sure you're keeping up with everything going on around the league, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast because you're getting hosts from all the different teams and you're covering everything around the NFL. I listen to that so I can keep up because even though we're Chargers hosts, we still have to kind of keep up with everything going on throughout the league. But the Chargers, we know what they need, right? They need a right tackle and they need a right guard because right now, David, it's Senio Kelemete right now, Matt Filer and Brandon Hymus. And I just don't know, especially last year with the Chargers' unwillingness to play Brandon Hymus when Matt Filer is out and also after Oday Abushi went out. It's a little scary, right? Because they'd rather bring in Michael Schofield. So it's hard to know how to feel about that position. We know Senio Kelemete should never be in a game again. I think he's actually probably a free agent now. But either way, the Chargers have a big need at that position.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, I think you commend Michael Schofield for what he was able to provide you at right guard. A guy that, is familiar, who played right guard for the Chargers and right tackle at one point for the Chargers earlier on in his career. He's a solid guy. He's going to come in. You know what you're going to get out of him. It's nothing flashy, but he comes in, gets his job done. A guy
When
that
he's a free agent, yes.
yeah.
I mean, it'd be nice. They could bring out another one of these guys that name Michael Schofield. I actually like the way Michael Schofield played.
Yeah, no, like I said, I have nothing
Yeah.
bad to say about him. He comes in,
You
gets
hope
his
to
job
get an
done,
upgrade, though.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I think that upgrade might have been on the Chargers last year. And you got to hope that, he's going to be able to come back off of the ACL injury. And of course, I'm sure you figured it out by now, but I am talking about Oday Abushi. Oday Abushi played 296 snaps at right guard last year, did not allow a single sack, and only allowed 5 pressures. Also has position flexibility. He can play both guard spots pretty comparably. Less than 20 pressures allowed in 5 seasons, and has never allowed more than 5 sacks in his NFL career. And I feel like he really was hitting his stride, Daniel. He really looked comfortable, looked strong in that Chargers offense, on that Chargers offensive line. He's not going to cost a lot of money because of that injury.
Right.
I still think he's an ascending player, though. I feel like the Chargers should give him another shot because I really liked what I saw out of Oday Abushi when he was out there playing for the Bolts.
Yeah, and I think he might be their best option because I think he's going to be super affordable. He only made $1.75 million last season, so it's hard to imagine he'd make much more than that going into this season. Even though Chase Daniel somehow got a big pay bump, but with Oday Abushi, I mean, you'd expect him to come around somewhere around the same price, and you're probably getting a starting level player for $2 million. It's tough with Oday Abushi because he's only played in 15 or more games twice in 2 of his seasons, right? But it hasn't all been from injuries. I mean, he's bounced around the league. It took him a long time to catch on. He really didn't catch on as like a full-time starter until he made it to the Lions and played pretty much every game for them in the 2020 season. So I think that is something that's a little, sketchy because obviously you like the 5 games you saw from him, but it's only 5 games. I still think he's probably the best option. If they want to go outside of that, maybe it's Andrew Norwell, right, from the Jaguars, who's up there 30 plus, but still playing at a very high level. Only 24 pressures allowed, 3 sacks allowed last year. The one number that did a little bit, kind of set off an alarm was 8 penalties. Don't love that. But the Jaguars also signed Brandon Sheriff too, right? So this guy played in 13 or more games in 6 of the last 8 seasons. So he's been pretty durable. The other games were like 9 games and 11 games. So it wasn't like he was missing the whole season. But the contract is projected at least 3 years, $21.75 million, $7 million plus per season. So I don't know if that's realistic, but he would obviously be an upgrade.
He would be an upgrade for sure. I think that's a bit rich, especially considering the Chargers cap situation at present, but we'll get into that a little
Well,
bit
Morgan
later on.
Moses, I mean, just, obviously a different position, a right tackle, but like he made 3 years, 15 million. So I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it could be something closer to that. I think most of the guard contracts have been somewhere between 5 and 7 million per season.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's probably a little bit more realistic here. But yeah, I mean, as far as Andrew Norwell, really strong as a pass protector. I think he excels in that realm. He has had a 73.5 pass blocking grade or higher in every single season of his NFL career and has 8 seasons of 3 sacks or less. So he's rock solid as a pass protector. He's adequate as a run blocker, but that is not the best part of his game. But I feel like, this is a guy you can plug into the Chargers offensive line and feel very good about it. I mean, he's not going to, I don't think he's going to be like a road grader against the run, but he is going to be very, very good as a pass blocker.
Totally. I mean, and like I said, I think if you're looking for best fit, best value, I still think it's Oday Abushi. He
Yeah.
fits in the scheme. He's going to come at a low price, and I just think that's too valuable of an option to pass up if you're the Chargers. I expect, hopefully, that that move would happen in the next couple of days. You would think, right? But
Yeah.
probably a very lower end kind of signing as far as money, so it could be a little while, I would assume. Now, David, it's linebacker time because we know that the best Chargers linebacker from 2021 is in free agency, and that's Kazir White. And we haven't
Yeah.
seen anything about him. I mean, me and you were talking about earlier. I haven't seen a single Chargers player that was on the Chargers in 2021 sign with another team yet. So
Not
I guess
one.
that shows you kind of where the rest of the week kind of falls on a lot of these guys who are free agents. But besides Kazir White, David, who I still think might be the best option for the Chargers, Bobby Wagner's out there, and that's an impossible name to avoid, especially with what that dude has done in his career and the lack of times he's been able to hit free agency even at his age.
Yeah, Bobby Wagner is crazy. I mean, and I think all you need to do is go back and look at this guy's stats, and you'll realize that he has been a machine since he has entered the
Of
NFL.
course. I mean,
And even last year, 170 tackles last year. That is ridiculous. That man, like I said, is a cyborg. But here, 130 plus tackles in 6 straight seasons. This guy is an animal. He is a
it also
tackling
shows you
machine.
durability too, right? I
Yes.
mean, if you're getting that many tackles in that many
He
straight seasons.
posts. Absolutely. He
Right.
answers the bell. The one big thing that was a giant red flag to me, though, is 14 missed tackles last year. That is definitely a concern. And, as he continues on in his career, that is something that is probably not going to get much better. I think it's probably only going to regress, but he's just a very solid all around player. 71.8 overall grade, 76.7 against the run, 70 as a pass rush, 62.8. I mean, just all of the numbers just super solid from Bobby Wagner. You can't look around the rest of the options that are out there at linebacker and come away with any other answer, but Bobby Wagner is the best of the rest.
Yeah, I mean, and he's still playing at a super high level. I mean, I do think that, yeah, he's probably not going to get a lot better, and missed tackles might be, losing half a step, so you're not in the position you are, usually in to make a good tackle. But I mean, with as many tackle attempts as he had, that's actually probably not as egregious as it seems. And
No.
I think you could see that kind of come a little bit down. I wouldn't surprise me if he missed less than 14 tackles next season. But I think Kazir White, though, makes more sense just because he's a fit in the system. He really started hitting his stride. It just doesn't seem like the Chargers want to bring him back. And I think it started in that last game when they decided to, put Kenneth Murray in a situation that Kazir White was, I think, much more well equipped for, right? So
Yeah.
that's the frustrating part. His projected contract is 2 years, 12 million, 6 million per average. Maybe if he doesn't get what he wants, the next few days, maybe they circle back around and kind of realize that and get him at a better price. Because obviously nobody's chomping at the bit for this dude yet. Under the radar guy I would bring up is Alexander Johnson, a guy who got a late start to his career, didn't play his first season until he was 27, but has played really well for the Broncos the last 3 seasons. Steal somebody from your division rival. They just brought back Josie Jewell. This is a guy that played 3 seasons with Vic Fangio as his head coach. He has a fit in the Chargers defense. More of a run stuffer for sure, but I don't know if the Chargers have that dude on the roster who's a pure run stuffer at this point. Might be a little bit out of their price range, but a guy with Brandon Staley ties who missed a few games last season, but has been an elite run stopper the last few seasons, and even had, Pro Football Focus had him graded as a top 3 linebacker in 2 of the last 3 seasons. So a guy that definitely would make some sense there. Just have to come down to what the price range is and how comfortable you are with him staying healthy, because Kazir White has been pretty durable outside of the big injury he suffered early on in his career. But the Chargers need some space for all that, right? Like, you need some money if you're going to go sign these guys, because the Chargers don't have a ton of cap space right now. But they did make a move to release Bryan Bulaga, a move we knew would happen, to really, free up $10.75 million. And we're going to talk about next what the Chargers salary cap is looking like at this point, headed into day 2 of free agency. And also talk about the Chargers bringing back backup Chase Daniel into the fold. All right, David. Well, the biggest move of free agency was obviously Chase Daniel coming back to the Chargers
Of
as their
course.
backup and, somehow doubling his pay from 2021. But a move that we expected to happen and really knew was going to happen happened on Tuesday when Bryan Bulaga, the Chargers right tackle that was supposed to help fix the offensive line, was released by the team. And he carried a $14 million cap hit this season, right? The Chargers are going to take on about $3 million in dead cap with this move. But more importantly, they're going to free up $10.75 million in space because of releasing him. And it just sucks, David, because, he was the guy that made a lot of sense. He had his checkered injury history, but he was able to gut it out most seasons, play 10-plus games, play much more than he did with the Chargers. He missed 16 games last season. The year before that, he missed 6. He missed 16 games over a 2-year span. And there's just no way you could wrap all of that up. There's no way you could justify bringing him back at $14 million, even though we just talked about in the first segment how big the need is at right tackle.
Yeah, it's an obvious glaring hole there, but unfortunately, Bryan Bulaga is not the answer. I think he was a solid option when the Chargers brought him in. I think we all celebrated the move because we saw the potential that he had, and we saw the play that he was able to put out there
Yeah.
beforehand. Unfortunately, we did
And he
not
played
see.
well when he could play. And when he did play with the Chargers, he still played at a pretty high level, right? It's just you only got 10 games of it,
Yeah, and that's the thing I was going to say is you didn't really get to see that manifest out there on the football field enough to warrant keeping him. So this was always a move that was a foregone conclusion. We see it come to fruition, and the Chargers needed it. They had to. I mean, especially after the 2 defensive linemen that they signed, it just seemed like the writing was very, very much written on the wall in permanent marker.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think with Bryan Bulaga, it's tough because you do see some tackles playing well into their 30s, right? Look at Andrew Whitworth, who just retired, right? Playing at an extremely high level. You can age well at that position. Dwayne Brown's still out there, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot
36.
of dudes who are still out there that are getting up there, that are still playing at a really high level. So it made sense at the time to think, maybe he could bounce back, blah, blah, blah. But either way, even the 10 games he did play, he left several of those early too, right? Where he left in
Yeah, it
the
was about
beginning of the
50%
game.
of the snaps, if I remember correctly.
Right. And that's, yeah, exactly. So it's more like playing half the season. But it just, for him, it just never worked out, even though the pick, made a lot of sense at the time. But that was the thing last year that made us so frustrated, was just the Chargers going into the season with a guy who missed as much time as he did,
Yeah.
not having a better backup plan than Storm Norton. We knew it well before he ended up getting hurt in that first game. We're like, hey, you can't trust this guy to stay healthy as much as he's a great player. But David, the Chargers obviously spent a lot of their salary cap, right? They came in with this much. Now it's getting a lot smaller because they signed J.C. Jackson. They signed Sebastian Joseph-Day. Khalil Mack took up a big chunk of that with a $17 plus million cap hit in year 1. And you also got Austin Johnson too. You got big players of need. You made your defense way, way better with the guys. Your overall talent defensively is just, it's not even in the same stratosphere, as what the Chargers had in 2020. And that's a defense that already had, or 2021, and that was with Joey Bosa and Derwin James, right? Still couldn't sniff what the Chargers have right now at that position. But Daniel Popper from The Athletic came out with what he believes the Chargers' spending space is at this point in free agency, because I do think we'll see some moves today as the things kind of settle in, and maybe some of these quarterbacks move, because it seems like a lot of things are waiting on, the Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, Jimmy Garoppolo of it all. But Daniel Popper has the Chargers at $6.83 million left in cap space, a spending space, after all the moves so far, factoring in what they have to pay the rookies still, which is like $6.6 million, in estimating the first year cap hits of Daniel, Joseph-Day, and Johnson, the guys that they've brought in so far that we don't have all the contract details on right now. It doesn't seem like a lot, David. Really, it is tough because the easy move would be to restructure, right? I mean, there's a lot of dudes that you can restructure their contract. You can restructure Khalil Mack, first of all, just because he doesn't have any guaranteed money in those last 2 years. So it's like you don't mind guaranteeing him some money in next season because you're assuming he's still going to be on your team next season,
Yeah.
So that doesn't really, change very much. But we also don't usually see the Chargers do that. They usually go, as hard as they can to not have to restructure contracts.
Yeah, and I mean they don't, right? But there are two contracts that are screaming out to you that they could definitely restructure and get some extra cap from. One of them is Joey Bosa's contract, who I think he has a $28 million cap hit here going on this season. That's definitely something I feel like if they wanted to restructure that deal, that wouldn't take very much to do. And also Keenan Allen is the second name who also has I think a $19 million cap hit here in 2022. So both of those contracts, if the Chargers were wanting to make more moves and add more pieces, of any kind of significance, they're going to have to restructure. I mean, they have maybe room for one or two moves without restructuring, and of course that depends on how much in-season money they're wanting to keep for moves. They might keep less money in the season so they can make more signings here in free agency. I do expect them to make a couple of other moves, but I don't think they're going to see anything the size of the contracts that we saw on the first day.
Well, the tough thing is like even not counting the rookies, right? Like you still have to fill a bunch of positions. Like you're
Yeah,
still going to have to bring in another body at tight end. You have to bring in another body at right tackle, right guard, all these positions. Like even if those guys sign for 1 million per, like they're still their backups, and guys after that you still have to sign. So like it seems like they have to restructure just to kind of fill out the roster
yeah,
at this point. But I mean, Tom Telesco never restructures, and the thing is, what you're doing in this situations, it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? But both edges are bad because if you're doing that this season, right, one thing they've done is really front load these contracts
yeah.
this year to give themselves maximum flexibility. You have JC Jackson at 16.5 AAV, only having an $8 million cap hit in
Just
year one, right?
beautiful.
It is. But what that means though is those contracts are going to balloon going
Yeah,
forward in those contracts, right? And those cap hits are going to keep going up and up, and you're putting all of that stuff towards other years. When you're restructuring a contract, you're just moving that money into other years of salary cap. You're making it a salary cap hit on different seasons. You get to spread it out over a few seasons, but you're going to have to pay the piper at some point. So it
sure.
is a dangerous game, but I think the Chargers obviously have to do it because the salary cap is going to keep going up. It's going to
Yeah,
keep booming. You'll be able to figure out a lot of that later on. And that doesn't mean you have to get yourself in the situation like the New Orleans Saints, or the Los Angeles Rams, where you have to make major moves to get under the cap or major restructures to keep kicking that can down the road. But if you do it with a couple contracts, I really don't think it's that detrimental. And you can tell because every single team in the league is doing it right now. But the other big signing, David, the huge signing so far this year, Chase Daniel back as the Chargers backup quarterback, mentoring Justin Herbert last season. I think the biggest thing to me is, first of all, you got, an extra $1 million, more than $1 million more. Last year, he signed for 1.075 in 2021. This year, he's signing for 2.25 million, and he didn't play in any games last year, so he must be bringing some very valuable leadership to the table. I
my
like Chase
goodness.
Daniel. I love what I see from him, on social media. Obviously, seems like a team guy, knows Joe Lombardi's system, blah blah blah. But I mean, that dude is great at collecting checks.
I mean, he's almost as good as Charlie Whitehurst was, right? Yeah, I mean, the original clipboard Jesus, that dude
Yeah,
got paid, and I mean paid majorly for not doing anything. Like that's why he was called clipboard Jesus, because he held the clipboard on the sideline doing
right.
nothing. This is another thing where I think the only thing about this situation to me is that they better not have three quarterbacks on the roster next year. I mean, I'm sorry. The Easton Stick experiment that has to end. If they're going to bring back Chase Daniel for another year, this cannot be another season with three quarterbacks. I can't see it. If I see it, I am going to go crazy.
I mean, the tough thing with Easton Stick, obviously, is that his money's guaranteed. So, like, you're not getting that money back if you release him. It's not a big hit. I think it's like $1 million, something along those lines. So, the nice thing is, though, is it's like, I mean, you can still slip him onto the practice squad. He's not a, highly valued commodity, even with all the quarterback turmoil going on throughout the league. Nobody's clamoring for Easton Stick. you can sneak him on there, but there's no need in today's NFL to have 3 quarterbacks, especially when you think about the fact that the one thing that could change this potentially, David, is the NFL not doing any COVID policies in 2022. They have gotten rid of all their COVID policies. You're not going to have a situation where your quarterback gets COVID and then, there's close contacts in the room. So now all of a sudden you're the Broncos starting Kendall Hinton, who's a wide receiver at quarterback, going like 1 for 9, right? So
Yeah.
I think with COVID, teams definitely were, being more cautious with it. I have to hope, because there's just no roster benefit unless you're going to have this dude, out there covering punts or something like that. There's no reason to keep him on the roster, because almost every game he was a healthy scratch anyways. You know what I mean? So he didn't get into
It's
any
a
game,
waste of a
obviously.
roster spot.
And it is 100% a waste of a roster spot to have 3 at this point, especially when number 1 is Justin Herbert, who's
Exactly.
a tank of a human being. And hopefully we'll
Knocking
never need.
linebackers out and
Well,
stuff.
another thing is like Justin Herbert goes out. It's not like Chase Daniel or Easton Stick is saving your season, right?
No.
Maybe for a game or two, Chase Daniel, if the Chargers continue to build this roster up, can win you a couple games or keep you afloat, kind of thing. But you have Justin Herbert. You don't need to worry too much about the backup quarterback, and you especially don't need to worry too much about the third string quarterback. But thank you guys for checking the show out today. The great news is free agency literally is only 2 days in. This is day 3 right now. So we'll be back with you guys maybe tonight if some crazy stuff goes down, but if not, tomorrow with all of the latest news through free agency and everything the Chargers are doing. But until then, make sure to go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel. If you're on here right now, make sure to click that subscribe button. And also follow the show for free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts from. We're on all the big ones: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those things, and rate and review if you like the show as well. We appreciate that. If you guys want to get our instant reactions as these moves are going down, make sure to follow us on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports. I'll be tweeting about things, even if I'm on the clock at my day job. I don't care. And then you can also find David Droegemeier on Twitter at DroTalkSD. And I could say he would do the same thing for you as well. But that's to get our instant reactions. You can also see him at Locked On LAC on Twitter, where we retweet all of our posts and post every show to all of those accounts every day, including our at Locked On Chargers Instagram page and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to get your voices on the show and ask us a question, make sure to keep it to 30, 45 seconds to call into 323-524-7924. I've loved hearing you guys' reactions so far. Keep the calls coming, and we'll have definitely some fan stuff for you guys soon. But we'll be back with you guys tomorrow with the latest in free agency. Hopefully we see the Chargers take a couple more swings today. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.